Hey there. Today I'm going to show you how I automated posting to Pinterest completely using Claude and Banner. To give you some context, I posted about this on Twitter and I promised to make a video, which is what I'm doing right now. And to give you some background info, I didn't immediately automate this. I spent some time paying a VA, training and paying a VA to post to Pinterest 30 times with a template to see how much traction we can get with the template, and also to see what the engagement looks like and if it's actually useful to people, which will show in your analytics, right? So if nobody's clicking these pins, if nobody's interacting with them and nobody's clicking through to the website that you're linking to, they're not going to have much value. So there's no use in scaling that because it's just AI crap, right? Which is some of the response that I've gotten to the tweet. People are right. It's not a like one size fits all answer. I'm not a fan of just posting as much as possible of AI stuff just for the sake of it. So make sure it makes sense, make sure that people like the content, and then if it makes sense, you can automate it. And to make sure it's worth it, I looked at the analytics after 2 weeks or more, more like a month. Usually it takes a while for Pinterest to pick up. It's not immediate, but it can also stay for longer. So it usually stays for 60 to 90 days before it kind of tapers off, at least from what I've seen. And I've also found a competitor that is pulling in 2 million views per month on their stuff. So yeah, this is a place where it makes sense to automate it, and it's visual output. So it's a speech which is generated, and we're selling a speech tool that writes speeches. So essentially we're showing examples of what the output could look like if you write a speech with that speech tool. I'm going to link that thing up under the tweet that I'll post this video to, and also on YouTube where this video is going to end up, so you can have a look. But let's jump into the main piece here. So essentially on Pinterest, again, I can see, is this working? How many impressions am I getting? Are the impressions growing? Are there outbound clicks? So people pressing it, engaging with it, how many engagements are they getting? Like what's the engagement rate and things like that. So that's something you want to pay attention to before you automate something, because otherwise you just end up automating the wrong thing and it costs both money and time to automate something. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is automate everything. But you need to, pick your battles, allocate your resource according to what makes the most sense. All right, so in Make, what that looks like, and you can also use Zapier for this, doesn't really matter. I used Make because it's cheaper, I think. What I've done is every 2 hours, 24 minutes, so 12 times a day, a bit less, I put the schedule here that essentially runs on a schedule called an HTTP request, which is just like a very simple API that I put up to give dynamic context to the prompt. So essentially, I want to not always use the same template. I don't always want to write the speech for the same person. I have a URL which essentially ends up in the pin to be the URL that people click and land on when they click the pin. I have a board ID, which is essentially the board on Pinterest, which is again dynamic because I have one board for each of these cousin, dad, grandpa, whatever personas, and a style. So it's like emotional, funny, personal, warm, whatever, right? So it's just like random values essentially just to have option in it. And I'm, this is the first iteration. I'm probably going to iterate a bunch on this, making it more dynamic, making it more different, to making it more niche as well. So I think that's one of the main things you can do with AI, is you can be super, super niche in what you're producing in terms of content, just because if you would have done this manually, it would have cost you $20 to produce this piece of content, and now it costs you 1 cent, right? So if you're targeting niches, most of them aren't big enough to be justifying like $20 of spend for a piece of content. But now if it costs you basically nothing, then you can do it, and you can target all these long tail keywords or variations or whatever that you otherwise couldn't. And I think that's the big opportunity here, right? To look into that, essentially how you can use that for yourself. And I like to compare it a bit to the time when people would target and would sell shirts for, the most random combinations of like attributes, but it's not possible anymore on Facebook, right? Because they clapped you with the targeting at some point. So that's kind of inspiration, you can think about. All right, so then after that comes back with random dynamic data. And if you don't want to do some sort of API because you don't know how to code, you want to use purely no code, I think, and I just thought about this afterwards, because I tried to do it with no code, but I couldn't immediately. So then I was just like, okay, fuck it, I'll just write code because I can. And so you could do a Google Sheet, and then in the Google Sheet you would have all the columns you have now in the return, maybe flat. That's probably easier. So essentially return, make a Google Sheet, 3-4 columns, put all the values flat in rows, and then make a automation that reads the Google Sheet, and then it just sends it in the next step through a function that is called shuffle or something. There's probably something similar in Zapier again. And then you shuffle the array rows. So you put all the rows in an array, and then you shuffle it, which means the first value will be random. That's essentially, reproducing the random functionality here at slightly more mindfuck, I would say. Like, it doesn't seem very straightforward from like my perspective, but it's a way to do it, right? If you can code, or if you think that, for example, changing the code is too much work and you want to have someone else use the Google Sheet and let them add values to the Google Sheet, new rows, that's obviously much easier if they're not in code, right? So different, things to think about here in the workflow. So then we're running a prompt, fairly standard, and then we're running that through the parser, which sends us the speech as text, and then we run it through a parser that removes, because Claude adds new lines in the speech to separate the roles, or like the paragraphs rather, and the next step doesn't handle these new lines because that's not technically valid JSON, right? So it's JSON, and then it just breaks. So what I'm doing with the text parser is I'm replacing all new lines, which you can use a pattern. They have that built in with a character sequence essentially that indicates the same thing, and it ends up being correct in the template, but it doesn't break. So I'm applying that to whatever comes back here from Claude. Next up is then going into Bannerbear, which is a automation tool from a fellow indie hacker. So yeah, check it out. Very easy to set up. I'm not affiliated with it or anything, but I think it was very useful. And what I'm doing is I am in the template that comes from the API. I'm piping in the text in the template that is dynamic. I'm typing in the title, which is based off of whatever comes back from the API, and then the style, just to give a different kind of keyword variation. So the main keyword is like eulogy example or eulogy examples, and then it's like, dad eulogy example, and then warm or funny or whatever. So this I'll probably also iterate on, be more creative with like AI rather than using a template. But for now, this is where it's, and then that thing goes ahead and uses the template that I provided to then merge the texts, images, whatever, into the template, creates an image, and then I wait here for I think 10 seconds or whatever, because the image isn't immediately populated. You can use a webhook for this, but this is like easier, right? But it could break if it takes longer than 10 seconds. It's the downside. But essentially I'm waiting. It's just a sleep delay function. Then I'm getting an image. So essentially I'm taking the image UID from here, and I am piping that in here to then get the image with the completed image URL. So the image is now set and I can use it, and then I'll upload it to Pinterest as the image URL here, the board ID that I retrieved from the API, the I don't know what this is, doesn't matter, and then the title, the description, and the link, which is these are all like injected from the API in the beginning. And then Pinterest goes ahead and posts it, and Pinterest posts it immediately, right? Which is why I have the schedule running here, because I don't want to do it just every time I run this. So I was looking to run it like bunch in a row and then schedule that with the scheduling function of Pinterest, but that doesn't really make sense and doesn't work either. So I put the pressure here onto the schedule itself. And yeah, to show you a kind of example, the output essentially looks like this. So we have the title, we have a speech on a template that I think created in Canva. I don't even know, but all this stuff is dynamic, and we can now go ahead and again, iterate on this, make sure we're not getting slapped because we're posting too much. So don't post like every minute or whatever, just I think 10 to 15 a day For now, we're just posting these, but we can also now just copy paste this automation and target other things, add more variations of the template. So just make sure that, you know, you have variation, different colors. Like I already have 4 or 5 different templates with different colors. I think you can see that here. So some of this gray, and then there's like pink and blue. And yeah, just, you know, be creative and make sure that, again, it's always useful, you know, for the user. If it stops being useful, stop doing it, because it's not going to convert anyway. It's just going to cost you money. It's going to waste people's time, and you're not going to really have any results, most likely, right? So yeah, that's, I think, everything already. And if you have any more questions, want to see any more details, just let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Cheers.